Thank you very much indeed. We'll get started on the half hour. That's what we promised to do. My name is Martin Gill, and a very warm welcome to what is the 33rd Security Thought Leadership webinar of our series. We've been here every Tuesday and Thursday throughout lockdown, and will continue to be here. And the object of our Thought Leadership webinars, all about different aspects of security, is to examine and to analyse a security issue. And the idea being that we critique what's going on today in order we get a better type of security in the future. But in fact, there are two distinct differences about our webinar today. The first is that it's specifically about South Africa, and I'll come to that in a second. And the second is that today we launch the South African Outstanding Security Performance Awards. For those of you who don't know about the OSPAS, very briefly, a worldwide award scheme based on ethical principles. It's already in 13 countries and it's expanding, and we're delighted to announce that in partnership with Securex, the Outstanding Security Performance Awards for South Africa will take place at Securex in 2021, in June 2021. And one of the key points about the OSPAS is that it involves all the leading security associations and leading security media outlets. As you can see at the bottom of your screen there, they're people who are involved, and they've been involved in helping us appoint judges and helping us set up the South African version. So thank you very much indeed to all of them for their support. To let you know that these are the categories that will be available in South Africa. They open on the 28th of September 2020. So look out for that, and we'll be in touch to let you know more. And there's the website where you can find a lot more about South Africa and, of course, about the OSPAS globally. So back to the object of today. Our webinar is COVID-19, where to now for private security in South Africa. And as with all our webinars, we've got with you an expert panel. In a second, I will be asking them each to introduce themselves. And once they've done that, I will then invite each of them to make an opening statement. You have a question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. And I'd encourage you to ask your questions as soon as you can. And I'll endeavour to get them involve your questions to the panel after they've made their opening statements. So first and foremost then, without further ado, let's go to our panel, and let me ask them each to introduce themselves, a very brief introduction. First of all, Andrew Kelly.
Good afternoon. Kelly, currently the global head or global operations security specialist for Coca-Cola Africa, and a founding member of one of the newest associations in South Africa, being the African Association of Threat Assessment Professionals. Lovely to be with you and enjoying the chance with the panelists.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. And Lizette, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Lizette Lancaster. I am the manager of the Crime and Justice Information Hub at the Institute for Security Studies. We are an African-based non-profit organization looking at policy analysis and capacity building, as well as technical assistance for security and safety across Africa.
Thank you very much indeed. Leonie, you introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Leonie Mangold. I am the Vice Chairperson for ESDA, which is the Electronic Security Distributors Association of South Africa. And I am employed at a company called Paltronics, and I've been in the security industry, particularly focused on access control, electronic access control, for the past 9 years.
Thank you very much indeed. And finally, Jean-Pierre, if you could just introduce yourself, please.
Afternoon. My apologies for logging on a little bit late, finishing a meeting with the mayor. He's my boss, so I don't get to walk out on him. Afternoon, everybody. I'm JP Smith. I'm the mayoral committee member for safety and security and events in the city of Cape Town. I have been a mayoral committee member now in this portfolio for, I think it's the 11th year. So I think it's just about the longest running person to occupy a single portfolio. And before that, I was the portfolio committee chairperson. I was a city councillor for the Atlantic Seaboard as well previously, and currently a councillor deployed in the community of Langa, and have a reasonable cross-section around, or appreciation of issues around legislation, operational matters, the technology side of it, and the impact on the rest of the criminal justice system.
Thank you very much indeed. So what I'm going to do now is going to go to each of our panelists in the same order and ask them for their opening statement. This is where they get just 3 minutes to give their views on the topic of interest. So Andrew, your opening statement, please.
So I'm going to be the contentious one. I think historically the security industry in South Africa has failed to deliver a professional service. It's one of the type of environments where individuals who are perceived as uneducated, unable to get a traditional job or a standard job, enter a market at the lowest paid salary, and therefore the security industry has failed to actually achieve the growth that it could, considering that there are more security practitioners in private industry than currently there are deployed in the government's police forces or state security services. So I'm going to start with that one. We're not at the professional level we need to be.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. Lisette, your opening statement, please.
Yes, so in the past 8 to 9 years, we have seen increases in many of our violent crime levels. We've seen increases, especially in robberies. And with that, we've also seen significant increases in the private security industry because people have outsourced law enforcement or their security to a great extent, as we have seen decreases in satisfaction levels with the police. There's a large trust deficit between government and the citizens, and one of the beneficiaries have been the private security industry. But of course, with the pandemic, fractures have emerged. And there are many questions we need to ask when we are starting to see rising robbery rates, as we have already, and burglaries and violent crime. Given a substantive economic downturn, the question is, what role will private securities play? They've also been in support of law enforcement agencies such as the police, Metro Police, in land invasions and such. And the question is, what role are they seeing and what relationship they have with communities? Furthermore, of course, there's also contentious issues around civil unrest and rising levels that we have been monitoring. So the question is what role they play in those. And then in terms of biometrics and so on, we've seen very large contestation in the US with facial recognition. There are also many questions and surveys around tasers, body cams and such, and it would be interesting to start exploring evidence-based research in these type of environments. So that's a mouthful for now, but there's a lot that we can explore.
Thank you very much indeed, Lisette. Leonie, your opening statement, please.
Okay, so coming out of the pandemic and the lockdown, the electronic security industry is facing a lot of challenges. We've had to be quick thinking and innovative in our supply of solutions, incorporating and integrating screening technologies into our security solutions. Compliance is now the driving force behind just about all security solutions being offered. With all the regulations and legislations in place at the moment, innovation, integration, and longevity have never been more important than they are now. Although health and safety are the primary focus in the security solutions throughout South Africa at the moment, crime is still on the rise, and it's going to get even worse. And the solutions that we need to provide need to address security as well as compliance. One of the other obstacles that we are facing and are going to continue to face is affordability. However, I do believe that affordability can be justified by educating the users on the longevity, the reliability, the functionality, and the well thought out innovative solutions that are available. Contactless technology in the way of biometrics is front and center right at this moment. And we've seen a massive demand to replace traditional contact biometric technology with contactless biometrics and facial recognition. And although this presents a great opportunity for suppliers, it also poses a huge loss of revenue to both suppliers and owners of the system. And then lastly, consistency is the key to customer retention in these times. Staying close to one's clients, keeping them informed and updated on what's new and what's available is what is really important right now.
Thank you very much indeed to Leonie. So can I just remind the audience that there's a question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. Do please get your questions in early, and as soon as Jean-Pierre's finished, we'll come to you to get your questions involved. Question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. And with that, Jean-Pierre, your opening statement, please.
So I think it needs to be said that at this stage, it is true that there is more budget in the private security sector than in the National Police Force, the South African Police. And this creates a variety of challenges. I think that the public sector would like to see some of that funding that's going in the private sector spent in the public sector, because I think that you can appreciate that the private security spend by and large does not benefit all the communities. It benefits communities that can afford to pay for security. But there is an enormous amount of value and innovation locked up in the private security sector. Much of the innovation that trickles into the police force, and that includes things like ANPR, camera systems and otherwise, originate within the private security. And they've had impressive results in terms of improving the safety in relation to property crime, for instance. So the challenge is how you marry that against what the state has to achieve as a whole in terms of improving safety for everybody. And this is something that I don't think South Africa has gotten right. We haven't gotten the right relationship yet between private security and the state. And some of this comes down to the powers of private security, what those powers should be. And that is a debate that needs to be had. There are often attempts by private security to acquire additional powers, and there is space for that kind of plural policing. But with that, we'll have to go oversight and accountability mechanisms as well. The city's response to this has been Rent-A-Cop, where we make city law enforcement and Metro Police and traffic officers available for external sponsors, very much like the private security industry does, except with the powers of arrest, search, seizure, and issuing notices, etc. We have been keen to reach out to the private security industry to see if we can integrate them with our operations better. I think there are 6 potential areas of collaboration. We have had conversations with the umbrella bodies before. Those conversations have not gone as far as we would like, and I think the door remains open, and we're keen to talk to them still to see whether we can do things like shared comms, shared crime intel, and otherwise.
JP, thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate that. And let's go to some questions then. And the first question actually is really a criticism of me, in the sense that wants to know why we haven't got any representatives from Black South Africans. Well, they were invited actually. We did invite someone, but it wasn't able to accept. But here's a good point actually. One of the things that has been put out to me is around the world, there's a lack of representation of different minority groups, and indeed women, in the senior echelons of the security sector. This is true worldwide, actually, not just in South Africa. I just wonder if I could come to you first, Andrew. What's the barrier to getting better representation?
So I think from my experience, the biggest barrier has historically been the entry level. So again, at my opening comment, I said that this was the security industry in South Africa was traditionally considered an environment where you were not conscripted, you didn't join the police, and therefore, if you couldn't get a normal job through a lack of education from historic or any other context, you joined a industry that had a very low bar. In other words, you could just show up, be given a uniform at one stage, and you could be deployed immediately. We moved forward. We did introduce improvements. However, we didn't grasp on them and actually mentor and grow individuals and improve their education so that they could actually grow up through the echelons into leadership positions. And again, one of the historic issues, many of the security companies were formed by people leaving the military who had an officer's position, etc. So they left, and those were sadly in the past traditionally white South African males. So that would be one of the first entries of barrier, was a historical context And then the current barrier is that we just haven't moved forward in education and making this a profession. It's a security practice and it's not a security profession in South Africa just yet.
Yes, okay, thank you. Let me come to you, Lisette. I mean, similarly to a whole range of minorities, women are also underrepresented in the security sector worldwide, I might add. We've just done a worldwide survey on this and published it. Lisette, what's the situation like in South Africa, and what's the barrier to that being not better than it is?
This is traditional, as Andrew pointed out, a very male and white dominated industry. Even the security forces we saw in the apartheid years and colonial past has never been necessarily a popular choice because of its ideology. Of course, and then as people have emerged and has found placement here or in security forces or the agencies, there has been a lot of there's a type of affirmative action positions for leadership and so forth that has been applied in South Africa, also for women. So we are seeing the numbers rising. And that's encouraging because, of course, it brings about new types of approaches to many of these things. But still, if we look at I'm not talking about the official police service, but if we look at private security, as Andrew pointed out, unfortunately, many of the organizations or the agencies, the private security agencies, are still very white male dominated leaders. And unfortunately, the people that are entry level don't seem to get opportunities always to rise to the top of some of these organizations and to senior leadership positions.
Okay, Leonie, it seems to me this is something that could change given the political will and the commitment of the sector to change. That seems to be lacking. Is that a correct summary?
I think so, yes. I do think that, you know, we as a nation are working, and, you know, individuals within the security industry are working to make changes. You know, I've been in the security industry, private security industry for 14, 15 years. Not on the service providing side, but on the actual product supply side. And yes, there is, it's definitely a male dominated environment, and definitely dominated by white South Africans. But I think that there is definitely, you know, I would say that the younger people coming into the industry of color are coming in with new ideas. You know, they're enthusiastic, they're excited, and they come with, you know, with new ideas and open minds. So I do think that moving forward, you know, in the next couple of years, we are going to see some really good changes in the way of bringing in, you know, traditional Black South Africans into this industry in leading roles and adding value to the industry.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Jean-Pierre, I wonder whether I can come back to you, something that you raised in your opening statement, which I think is a really important one. And again, this is also not just true of South Africa, it's true around the world. It's the ability of the state to harness all that's good about private security. And if you stand back, the experts say you've got to have a strategy, and it's got to come from government, and it's got to be meaningful. Is there a strategy? And if not, why not? And what would it take to get one to overcome some of the problems that you've raised?
So just to go back to your Q&A question, I think it would have been preferable to have seen a panel more representative of the demographics. But as a panelist, you know, one can contribute to the best of your ability. It should perhaps, or was perhaps useful to know that Cape Town spends around 480 million rand a year on private security, and the provincial government about almost double that. And I can say from my It's not contracted by my department, but I can tell you that it's largely or almost exclusively triple B, double E companies who get that work. I also just want to point out that what we are seeing is the enthusiasm amongst the security operatives for getting into permanent law enforcement, traffic, metro police, and SAPs is obviously significant. And when we place ads, you can place 26 ads, you'll get 30,000 applications. So there's a very significant appetite. And there, even the city of Cape Town is the only city in South Africa that has a policing reservist service modeled after the specials in the UK. So we have a law enforcement reservist category, and we see that many security guards sign up and go and work in that and use it as a springboard to get into permanent staff, which we encourage. In terms of your question now, I think that there's a lot of localized partnerships. So with every station commander in the different police precincts in the Cape Town, the 60 different policing precincts, they have station crime combating forums. And at those forums, you will see private security plugging in with various levels of efficacy. And in some cases, the station commanders embrace the roles of those private security companies very much. You'll see pictures of policing operations with them involved, and that often raises eyebrows by the watchdogs on the other side who question the powers and appropriateness of the extent of private security integration into these spaces. So it is a matter of balancing oversight and powers with the ability and the eagerness to assist. So very strong localized partnerships in some areas, and in other areas not so much. And I think this is a deficiency that one that should be improved. As I said, we have a desire to see a more structured citywide relationship by bringing security companies into our control room, defining the exact role that they play, making sure that role is properly structured and recognized and governed by an agreement. And that door very much remains open. We're even willing to do it on a pilot basis if only certain security companies initially come forward. And of course, against that backdrop, we have to respect the legislation, which as soon as you create anything or do anything like that that may achieve or supply benefit to a particular security provider, there has to be a competitive process, procurement process. So we have to tiptoe through this and not be cavalier about it, because it does have risk for the municipality in terms of non-compliance with procurement processes. Even if there isn't fund exchange, any perceived benefit to one company creates challenges.
Yeah, fair enough, and I understand it. Well, let's move on then. We'll come back to some of these issues. Let me come to Leonie first on this question. Leonie, one of the things that was of interest when we set up this webinar has been about the impact of COVID-19. And I wonder, from your expertise in your world, what have you seen has been the most impact of COVID-19 on the security sector and what it's dealing with? Have there been any radical changes? And I'll come to Lisette with the same question afterwards. Leonie first.
Yes, so we have seen some, some serious challenges. Obviously, what we have noticed is that coming out of lockdown, there seems to have been a bit of a knee-jerk reaction in terms of, oh my goodness, we need to sanitize, we need to thermal screen everybody, and compliance really is the driving factor at the moment. That has been front and center since the start of lockdown, and we've come out of one of the harshest lockdowns in the world. And what we are finding is that the priority over the last 8 weeks or so has literally been, we need to secure our premises. We need to make sure that people coming in are not displaying any symptoms, all of these things. So in terms of how it's affected the security space, particularly in the space that I play in, and that's electronic security, is that our traditional security products are now, we have to think quickly, we have to innovate, we've got to adapt, we've got to come up with great new ideas of incorporating these technologies, screening technologies, to bring them into your security system, to deal with the oh Lord, I'm losing my mind here. Sorry. The compliance side of it. You know, there's so many regulations. You know, one of the issues faced is that if you are running your organization and somebody comes into your facility and tests positive, you're going to have to close your doors for 2 weeks while you do a deep clean and get everybody out. That obviously is going to impact on your business. You know, other challenges that we have faced as suppliers of electronic product in the security industry is the radical move to get rid of technology that has worked and been tried and tested over the years because people don't want to touch it. So, you know, we've had to think quickly. We've got to bring in facial recognition. All of these things come at great expense. You know, and the expense lies in that you've already invested money in a system that has contributed and made sure that your security needs are met. Now we need to, you know, the demand out there or the requirement is to replace those tried and tested expensive solutions with quick fixes to accommodate not touching your product. And, you know, that in itself presents, you know, problems in terms of you know, being in the hard lockdown that South Africa was in. Many organizations were incapable of generating any income. So now you're faced with, you've come out of lockdown, you've had a loss of earnings for 5 to 7 weeks, depending on what you were doing. And now all of a sudden you need to find CapEx to replace your systems to accommodate this new requirement, you know. So,
okay, thank you, Leonie. I'm going to stop you there because I want to move on to interesting you raised. Conrad Weinert asked specifically about these emerging technologies and how to and how they're going to interact with humans. And I think you've actually answered a question that's just come in. So thank you for that. Lizette, let me come to you in your world. Same question, the impact of COVID-19.
Thank you. So initially it looked like crime is going down and so forth because of a restriction of movement and such, but we are seeing increases. And of course, now you're seeing increases in crime and desperation. And in Johannesburg, we're seeing a lot of robberies, hijackings happening, or for instance, delivery vehicles. So the question is, are we actually having, you know, the capability to assess quickly what is going on and to respond to that? I mean, I'll speak about the technology now because it's actually a really also interesting point. But what we are also seeing is that law enforcement, security guards and such are on the forefront of many of the activities, economic activities happening. They are police, together with private security, Metro are policing the restrictions of the lockdown that is still there, taking away ample resources from actual crime prevention initiatives. So we are seeing arrests of people that are just breaking lockdown regulations, and I mean, that's understandable. But we're also seeing people becoming infected, and there's also problems with people, especially security guards, manning these shops, you know, taking the temperatures and such, and their mental wellness and their physical wellness. And for many of these people, they are precariously employed. They are the lowest level employees, and they don't have medical aids. They do not have the type of access to many of the mental health facilities that are also required. So that's just one point. The other is that, you know, there's been, we can say a lot about arrests and the role that private security plays with civil unrest regulation or trying to police that, and policing restrictions in shops or out there. So there's that aspect. But just to get back to technology, the big fear here for us, and my colleague Karen Ellen and many have written about facial recognition and the dangers, is just that if we now have these knee-jerk type of reactions without proper evidence-based, considerations, we might run into problems. There are myriad of problems when it comes to certain facial recognition software, from bias in the algorithms through to hackability, through to just misuse of the information, especially in terms of the POPI Act. So there are lots of considerations that I don't think are really fully understood and discussed in the industry.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Andrew, you come at this from a completely separate direction or different direction. The implication of COVID-19 on you and what you're seeing as the reaction.
So I think,
Andrew, we're losing you a bit.
Ultimately, security. I'm going to put my camera off just so we don't lose
yes,
my
okay.
voice.
Thank you.
We're currently still very reactionary from a security practitioner's point in South Africa and Africa. Everything is reacting to an issue as opposed to trying to lead and get forward and actually come to root cause of what some of the driving economic problems may be. So from a corporate perspective, corporations who are looking at, well, maybe we need to change how we look at our operations. Maybe we don't need as much officers. Officers will always be there, but maybe we don't need as many. Or also looking for that beautiful knit between technology, policies and procedures, and people. And the swing of the pendulum goes two ways. The technology players are really trying to say technology is the solution. And the manpower, which again, to come to what Jean-Pierre was highlighting, is you have this massive surge of people coming forward looking for jobs. Why? Because this is a low entry market. And with a mass 35% unemployment, this is the opportunity. If I can step in and take a low paying job as opposed to having no job, I'm going to apply for every opportunity available. The security providers then are trying to push the numbers game. How many more can I throw at your problem? You don't need the technology, and we'll be your compliance. We'll be your front-facing solution of ensuring that you can protect your business or protect your people. To Lizette's comment a second ago, they are the people that are at the front face of the coal. They're the ones that are supposed to enforce the compliance or enforce that people can't enter an environment but they still have this lack of training and lack of capability. Business practitioners or people in the corporate world are turning and saying, if you're a security provider, you're supposedly the professional in that field. We want guidance. We want you guys to be partners and fix our problem. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that. We're seeing a lot of salesmanship, and we're seeing people trying to push either the numbers or the technology to the solution. So we're not being proactive, we're being reactionary still.
Thank you very much indeed. Jean-Pierre, on this issue, I wonder whether I could ask you, picking up on what has just been said, and indeed a question, is that how do you stop people using cheap solutions? And again, it's not a problem just in South Africa. I mean, we've done 32 webinars so far, and this has cropped up quite a bit. That it's certainly true in the UK and the United States, that you can professionalize a service, but people still, even the state, buy cheap solutions. Jean-Pierre.
So absolutely, I think it's easy for government to make itself guilty of that because procurement systems are clumsy. The way in which they're structured and the way in which national legislation compels local government to do procurement, you do not get finely tuned outcomes easily. So often, as a policymaker or somebody in the political executive of the city, you shake your head at what those procurement processes deliver. I think that it is partly the industry can help by setting standards for what constitutes the professionalization and the upskilling and upgrading of the staff involved. I mean, we understand how much of the salary that we pay doesn't reach the security guard, but gets absorbed by the company. We understand they have overheads. But all of us would like to see the people who actually work end up working for you. The security guards that we have in this very building, who you greet every day and speak to, one wants to see them also have better lives. So I think the industry can help by setting better standards for what should be in those procurement and tender requirements, as opposed to allowing government to try and figure that out. And I think we have seen the steadily escalating cost of private security as a percentage of our budget rise beyond what we can afford. In other words, the cost of our private security that we employ is rising faster than the municipal income is rising, or relative to it at least. And this means we've had to start looking for other solutions. So we are insourcing some of that in what we call facility protection officers. This is our auxiliary members, our reservists who are not employed on an EPWP budget to look after facilities. So we're having to fish for alternatives to try and get better quality solutions as well, and intelligence-driven solutions. And I think that's somewhere where the private security can compete very well, because they can often have more sophisticated information-driven systems than government has, even though we should be giving the tone there. That functionality within government has become weak or decrepit. And I think there the private security actually has a lot to offer. I do want to say we need to be careful with private information. I think there's been a cavalier approach by private security around this. We need to be respectful of the POPI Act. I noted the question in the Q&A, and it's very valid, how that data is monetized or so. There are significant challenges and problems here. I think companies are straying on the wrong side of the law, and government can be pulled into that if they're not careful with how they write their tender requirements and how we enforce these things. We have, for instance, in the city, we have used as the city ANPR technology. There are now around 800 cameras on poles put up by private neighborhood watchers, security companies, and others who are in partnership with the city through the license plate recognition user group. And we have an MOA with them. And in that MOA, we've had to be very specific about how that protection of private information is shielded and not monetized, because when you involve yourself with a private security company, things they do wrong have potential liability for government as well in this. And I want to say that in the beginning of the COVID infection, certainly the crime patterns changed dramatically. I think alcohol, the ban on alcohol had a major role in reducing trauma incidents in motor vehicle accidents, fires, interpersonal contact and violence, etc. And we've seen those patterns change. It is so that organized crime syndicates and others were impacted by the hard lockdown initially, and I think are now looking for other ways to monetize. They're also changing their MOs, and that means that we all have to adapt accordingly, and it's setting new challenges for all of us.
Thank you very much indeed. We had a previous webinar with two ex-offenders talking to us, and they confirmed just this, that they're very adaptable ex-offenders, and if they were active, they'd be looking for all sorts of new opportunities. They thought it was a gold mine. Okay, let me come to Lizette now. And Lizette, Bruce Robertson's got a question. I'm going to ask you to be brief if I can, Lizette, because we're getting near. Who makes the point that the combination, we've so far heard on this webinar, very much technology on the one hand and humans on the other. And yet we've got this thing called convergence, and it goes under various other names, coming together. And therein rests the opportunity, Bruce says, for a different type of security and a different way of thinking. Lizette, I'll come to you first and then Leonie after. But Lizette, could you be very brief, please? Lizette.
Yes, I think we do need to think very differently. And I think he also raises the issue about cybercrime and such. We are way behind the 8 ball with that. And it is really important that the cybercrime bill, security bill gets passed, but also we were urged to all give input in it, because it's evolving all the time. And it's really time that we have, to Andrew's first point, have a more sophisticated, almost private security under CIRA, and to really look at more professional type skills, because a lot of it is determined by the old type of demand for traditional security. And it's really high time that we don't just look at technology as a solution to some target hardening or for accessibility, but also look how it can be used to really do crime pattern analysis, to really do innovative policing, and to work smarter, not harder.
Thank you very much indeed. Leonie, seems relevant to ask you the same question. We need to think differently, and bringing these various elements together has a part to play. Leonie?
Yes, definitely. I do think that we need to listen more and talk less when we're with our clients. You know, we need to understand what their challenges are. And you know, and when I say listen, we really need to listen to what their needs are. If we understand what the challenges are that they face, we can come up with better innovations. We can come up with solutions that actually meet their requirements, as opposed to sell them or trying to sell them quick fix, knee-jerk reaction solutions to fix what's happening now. You know, it's so important particularly with technology, that we supply an innovative solution that will address their problems, obviously at a price that is affordable to the client. And you know, obviously when you talk about the cost, you've got to look at all the things that come into play. You know, are you going to spend 100,000 Rand today on a face recognition reader because you want to use that reader because it's got a thermal sensor in it, because your priority today is you know, checking people's temperature for screening? Whereas in 18 months' time, when we've all been vaccinated for this virus, that component of the technology is no longer a requirement, but you've spent 100,000 Rand just to incorporate that into your immediate requirements. So I do believe that with technology and manpower, we need to come up with the right solution where you can use all of the aspects cohesively together to provide the correct solution at an affordable price, and address those issues. Your security is going to get worse. I mean, crime.
Thank you very much indeed, Leonie. I just want to come back to Andrew Kelly. Ewan Grant has asked a question. He's raised a couple of good points. And Andrew, I'm going to ask you just in 1 minute, if I might, he's picking you up on the point about private sector businesses seeking professional security inclusive packages. Says he'd be concerned about that, especially if they undercut whether it's externally state funded or not. Your thoughts, Andrew, very, very quickly on that.
Can we quickly redefine the question? I'm reading it, but I'm trying.
Yes, okay. So earlier on, Ewan Grant was raising the point that he's previously worked in customs. He's noted the interdependence of public law enforcement on personnel and equipment transfers, and the possibility of governments looking abroad to places like China or Russia for security support, especially in sensitive areas, he's saying, like wildlife and fisheries. And he raises the danger there. I suppose from my point of view, I'm focused on private security, is also there an opportunity there. It's about getting that balance, isn't it? But if I could just ask you to be very brief, Andrew, we're running out of time.
Yeah, so to his earlier point, would they seek outside government?
We're losing you, Andrew. Can we
just... lowest bidder and foreign states? Yeah. So definitely foreign states would love to sell equipment that they can to the African governments at a lower price than perhaps European products. And again, that's just because of the economics. Would private businesses see that as a people to...
Andrew, we're just losing you.
All right, apologies that I'm experiencing load shedding. I think go ahead, Martin, take another question.
No, sorry, we're about to run out, Andrew. I wonder whether I could just get your headline issue. Just if you could just make just 2 quick points on this issue, and let's hope we can hear you.
So, private business is looking for service part.
Andrew, sorry, we can't hear you, so we're gonna have to cut you there. Okay, we're coming right to the end. I'm just going to ask the other 3 panelists very briefly. We've run out of time already. And just in 10 seconds, and 15 of you must, but if I could ask you to be precise, we're interested to know what is the main thing the security sector needs to do next in this aftermath of COVID-19 in order to bring a better type of private security going forward. you were in charge, you could do one thing, what would it be? Jean-Pierre.
I would have to say that I think that it doesn't have to be a race to the bottom, as was suggested by one of your Q&A questions for pricing. You'd be surprised by how eager government is to look at alternatives and more sophisticated options if you present us with those. We have started, for instance, to employ less security but more analysts linked to our theft loss unit that does more intelligence-driven approach. I think government would be keen to hear those kind of solutions instead of just driving more and more security provision with more and more poorly paid staff. So that is a space you can get into, because intelligence gathering and management thereof by government is very poor.
Thank you very much indeed. Lisette, headline issue, just 10 seconds if you would.
Policing alone can never solve South Africa's violence and crime levels. So what we need is exactly what JP has said. We need better private security in partnership with policing. It's not about more boots on the ground. It's about better evidence-based, innovative, and intelligence-led policing and private security, with ethics also thrown into the mix, because that to me is sometimes the missing part of it.
Thank you very much indeed. And Leonie, your final comment, please. What would you do?
We need to innovate, we need to be consistent, and we need to be flexible. We need to be flexible to the changes and, you know, open-minded and, you know, just really have the best interest of the country at heart.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you very much indeed to all my panel for your fascinating insights. We could have got on. There's so much more to discuss. Just a final few words, if I might, just to remind you that at Securex, South Africa, June the 2nd, we will be there with the South African OSPAS. They're the categories. Please go to that website. If you know someone who's really good, or you know a team, or you know a product, here's the chance. Please make sure that you do that. I'd be very grateful if you could spread the word throughout the world. Finally, just to let you know that we're here every Tuesday and Thursday, slightly later time. We're here on next Tuesday, and the topic of the webinar is climate change and security, unrest, the carbon footprint and security response. And next week, we've got another special, or the week after actually, another special webinar coming up, this time with Kenya. So thank you very much indeed, once again, to you, the audience, for your questions. Thank you very much indeed for the panel. Excellent job, concise answers, and I appreciate that. And hopefully you'll be able to join us again. And wherever you are in the world, stay safe.